Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the tools that we have available for us whenever we're working on a HIPAA project, and in particular whenever we're doing audits of a HIPAA project. My name is Chris Reddick and I'm the founder and CEO of Clarity Ventures. We do a lot of HIPAA compliant website development work and audits and reviews, and one of the big areas that we focus on is making recommendations for long-term maintenance and auditing and review for HIPAA compliance. Frankly, there is no kind of ironclad guarantee out there that your site and your business are operating in a HIPAA compliant way. There are guidelines and you work to constantly adhere to those guidelines. And that's basically how, from a very general perspective, the operations of maintaining and continually improving on your HIPAA compliance work. So one of the things that we recommend to clients is that they take a look at some of the recommended partners and options that are available. And so in this video, we're going to go into a deep dive into the Security Risk Assessment tool that the government actually makes available for free. Now, this particular tool is available for Windows devices. And so here you can see I'm on the Security Risk Assessment Tool website page where you can read about this in more detail. This is coming from the healthit.gov site, and you can kind of get into the details of not only the Security Risk Assessment tool, but also some of the details around HIPAA, how it works, some of the details around privacy and security rules and tools that are available. And this is just a great resource for you to go to constantly keep yourself apprised if you're working on a HIPAA application, a HIPAA mobile or tablet device. Maybe it's a kiosk device that needs to be HIPAA compliant or is for a medical portal of some kind. You know, any of these scenarios, we highly recommend that you just become aware so that you have an idea of what is available out there. So anyway, let's do a dive into this tool. So we've gone ahead and downloaded it, and we'll go ahead and install this. Okay, so now you can see one of the most important things that I think a lot of people have questions on is, will this send data to the government as I fill out these answers? And that you may not have that question. It's just something that people want to know. And the answer, according to their website, is no, it does not send data to the government. It's not going to transmit the data. You can kind of see they talk about this on their site. So they are not going to be, kind of monitoring what you're filling in whenever you're going through this. So they're also saying that it doesn't guarantee compliance, and you can also read that on their site. So just kind of as a note, I think that's helpful to know. They do have a guide that's, a pretty typical technical guide. It kind of goes into detail on what's available and how it works. So this is also can be pretty helpful, just so you kind of know how to use this tool. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Let's dive in, and we'll start a new SRA. And I'll just put this on the desktop. I like to name things with a specific naming convention. It can help just with consistency. So here I'm just saying SRA 2022, year, month, day. Save that. Okay, so they're just kind of giving me a disclaimer. Okay, so now we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the SRA tool. Basically, the security risk assessment is really meant to kind of help identify and assess risks with ePHI, electronic PHI information. So we're going to be kind of filling in information. In this particular case, I'm not operating a practice, so I'm going to kind of simulate that, but we'll just kind of walk you through this. And of course, we will kind of speed through some of these steps so that you don't have to go through them in painstaking detail here with me. Okay, so now we're on the assets screen, and this is a pretty interesting kind of opportunity to enter all of the different assets. Now here you can see that we're really looking at the different types of devices, and I'm going to just focus on servers and hosting type of information. So again, we'll kind of fast forward through this so you don't have to wait for all of this detail to get entered in. Okay, so now that I've entered a few of these assets, you can see it's basically giving me an initial assessment based on the fact that I did not choose asset encryption for my ePHI EMR system. So now I'm going to update that, and you can see my risk assessment has changed. Now you can upload an asset template, or you can export an asset list, or download a template to fill out. Most of the time, to really cover everything, especially if you're looking at a physical facility plus online resources, there's going to be a lot of information here. So we encourage you to take your time, go through this, and actually complete the full process. Now we're going to go ahead and add vendors as well. Okay, so now we've just kind of entered in a few vendors. You would want to enter in all of your vendors, but this kind of includes some different marks for these different vendors as to whether or not additional risks have been assessed or satisfactory assurances have been provided. And here again, you can download a template or upload a template, export the list as well. Okay, and then this is really for any additional documentation. So we can provide additional documentations. And this is really going to help us to kind of build out a case for preparing and having put all the pieces in place to be HIPAA compliant. Keep in mind, HIPAA compliance, generally speaking, is about being at kind of industry best practice within the operation and making sure that you're documenting and enforcing HIPAA compliance throughout the organization. Most of the HIPAA breaches that do occur, they tend toward being someone who simply isn't getting accountability. They don't have any kind of monitoring, any kind of just auditing of the basic HIPAA processes that are required. So documentation can really help show this. It can show a list of action items, as you can see, references, remediation plans, etc. This is really good supporting information, and it really just kind of forces you to do the right thing within your organization. So we do recommend taking the time to actually use, if you're going to use this tool for your HIPAA compliance, actually take the time to go through this methodically. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. So this is also going to help us by just kind of going through questions that will kind of get into the weeds on our assessment. So again, we'll kind of fast forward through this so you can see kind of the output, but these would be things that you would want to get into the weeds on and make sure that you actually complete in detail. And this does have a kind of progress indicator, and it allows you to basically save where you were and then pick back up later if you want. And this is great. Just as a side note, you can see there are specific references that we can go into detail on, and we can actually read any details or post any details here rather, if we want to follow up and just kind of provide more explanation, or if we want to get into notes, etc. Okay, so we're going to continue here. Okay, so you can see as I answer these different questions, I kind of get different side notes on the side as well. And this is really nice because it's kind of giving me a little bit of education as I go along. So here you can see with this form, anything that I've checked in the previous area shows questions that I need to fill out so that I can assess those areas in more detail. So it's then going to kind of break the area that I previously selected as not having been completed properly. Maybe we didn't do something, or we think there's a risk there. Then it's going to give me more detail to fill out. So if there's any potential concern that you have, we strongly recommend that you actually check the box so you can then go into the weeds, and you can see this is quite meticulous. So go into the weeds and specifically go into the risk awareness or failure to identify new weaknesses, failure to remediate known risks, failure to meet minimum regulatory requirements and security standards, inadequate asset tracking, unspecified workforce security responsibilities, and then go through those in detail. I'm going to finish this up and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so now that we've answered all these questions, this is a great time to just kind of take an assessment of where you think you stand. This is one of the most important aspects of HIPAA, is actually documenting kind of what your stance is and then taking corrective action. This isn't necessarily a game of being perfect. It's a game of constantly working on and approving and addressing any potential issues. Frankly, if you document that you have a plan, if you're actually working on that plan and you're putting valid and reasonable resources into addressing issues, there's going to be leniency if something actually occurs, typically. And that's kind of the experience that a lot of folks who have had HIPAA related issues at least tend to express. If you're doing something to address the issue that's reasonable, and hopefully you go a little bit beyond that, try to make it so that everyone can sleep well at night. Do your very best to address any issues and be proactive. And so this is a great time to really kind of dig in and ask yourself, are you thinking about these things as an organization? Are you addressing some of these topic areas? Okay, so we're going to keep going here. And here you can see we're going to dig into this in quite a bit of detail. But essentially, it's saying that these are some of the opportunities for us to complete and resolve. And again, I can put additional information, and I can export this, and I can also continue. So we're going to continue on. So we'll say it hasn't been updated in a while. Say somewhat. And again, you just want to be realistic with these questions. So here I'm going through everything and I'm just trying to answer, whether or not we're keeping our information. So do you make sure your information security risk management documentation is available to those who need it? Yes, basically. Make sure it's available to those who need it. Okay, and then again, you can select these vulnerability areas, and I'm going to leave those unchecked this time so you can see what happens when I do that. So now it just bumps me to the next section, and it's basically identifying areas of success and then areas for review. So these are areas that we need to dig into, and if I want, I can export this, and I can say areas for review. Okay, and then I can actually pull that open and we can get into the weeds internally. So we could hold a meeting, go through this, make any adjustments, and then come back and update this SRA tool. And I'm going to just go through these and simulate very successful security stance on the rest of these sections. So this is talking about our security officer and our workforce. And this is great. You can literally see exactly what you need to do in order to meet some of these requirements. So this is really, really helpful for you to just kind of go through this free tool that the government provides in order to comply with, or at least be able to audit and assess your HIPAA security. Quite a few questions here. This is really helpful though. And this is kind of a lot of any issues that are going to occur within the human side of the business. And that's almost always where most breaches, if you have some form of security that you're working on and implementing, Most of the time, any of the issues that occur, they're going to occur within kind of the human nature side of things. But okay, here we go. So we're going to we're going to kind of leave these unchecked so we can kind of hammer through here. And then here you can see there's one area for review that they're suggesting. And I'm just going to flag that one for question later so we can see how it handles that. And again, this is just really helpful so you can see a step-by-step. You could even hold internal reviews, either monthly or quarterly, annually, based on team members, and literally walk through this security risk assessment tool with them. And that would give you a really good opportunity to be able to just kind of educate your team and then help as a culture internally follow these standards. One of the most important things with any kind of HIPAA compliance is just making sure that the team knows about what the HIPAA rules are. That they need to be in a position where they can address HIPAA compliance needs and not be just scared of what HIPAA is, actually have the resources to be able to execute on that. So take a look at these as you go through them and make sure that you consider how you're going to get your team up to speed, especially team members who are actively involved in HIPAA compliance. Okay, so this was a big section, section 4, really, really important section going over really kind of security and data overall. So this has got to be one of the most critical aspects. Certainly you're going to want to get into the weeds. I'm just going through it quickly so you can see what's in here. So this is great. Once again, you can see it's just a lot of excellent information that you can glean just by going through the assessment that's really going to help get you up to speed on how to conduct your HIPAA compliant operations, and it's, do everything in your power to be HIPAA compliant. Okay, so here you can see I didn't answer several of these, or I flagged them for later, etc. Okay, now this is getting into security and business associates, so we'll go through this as well. And just gonna say no and see how it handles that. Okay, so this is basically saying that we ought to review, just because it's saying we don't contract with third-party vendors, which is interesting. Okay, that's probably good. Probably most companies actually do contract with third parties, so they're basically saying you probably need to do this. Okay, that's interesting. And now we're getting into contingency planning. If you've ever had any kind of an emergency occur, this can actually be critical to making sure that everything operates properly. Okay, so now that we're done, you can see that now we're getting a risk score. I'm getting specific areas for review and then vulnerabilities. And here you can kind of see how we scored overall and in what areas. So that is really cool. So then now we can go into the actual report and drill down into the details, which is awesome. So this is really cool too, because it's actually going through and date time stamping everything and saying who actually completed this, which is really cool. For a free tool, this is pretty powerful. And let's see if we can just kind of get into the weeds a little bit more. Okay, so then it's just giving us all of our flagged questions too, which is really convenient. So now I can go in and go back and answer those questions pretty easily. Very cool. Okay, so it's saying that you would go back through the assessment to answer them, but we can at least see what the question options are for later. Okay, so then we can save this, and then we can save as. Okay, so save works. It doesn't seem to be doing the save as. But that's just really, really nice. So let's try to go to another section here and actually go answer the section. Let's see, I think it was in here that I did leave some of these blank. Okay, here we go. Okay. So if I come back and fill all this out, okay, so 11, yeah, this is pretty nice to be able to jump around. It moves pretty quickly. Okay, so then I've gotten everything. And then if I wanted to go to my summary again. Okay, so it looks like it's updating as I go. So you can see that my risk score has now gone down and my areas for review have gone down too. So very cool. Really nice tool for free from the government to help you complete security risk assessments. And it really goes into a lot of detail here so that you can go in and do an assessment and figure out kind of how you're performing and hopefully really get this exposed to your internal organization and make this into a constant thing. Really get a cadence, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, depending on the roles. And as a HIPAA compliant organization or an organization that has a website, an application, any kind of resources that are ePHI or just PHI in general, this is an excellent tool to at least get your group exposed to this information and get them thinking about it. Now we're going to go over in this multi-part series, we're going to go over some of these other tools that you can see here, and we'll look forward to seeing you in that next video. Until then, if you enjoyed the content in this video, if you would like and subscribe, we certainly appreciate it, and we'll continue to provide you some of this excellent HIPAA training and resources in the next videos.